Hello, I'm John Beattie. Welcome to Cask to Glass, the whisky podcast where we examine the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. Have you ever thought, what's the biggest undiscovered city when it comes to whisky in Scotland? What is arguably one of the best undiscovered distilleries? Here's Neill Murphy from Scot on Scotch, the whisky podcast. Neill, good to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a nice wee chat here.
I'm really impressed by the backdrop. What's in there?
Yeah, so that's my wee whiskey collection there. It's not even really a collection. It's just that I buy bottles faster than I can drink them. So you end up with a bit too many. So yeah, I think most of them are open as well. That's the tragedy of it.
I know that's the bad bit, isn't it? You have a whole case full of cupboard full of open bottles. Before we get started, how did you get into the world of whiskey? And we'll go through what you do, because you do a lot of things. A lot of good things. So how did you get into it?
It sort of all started by accident, really. I think a lot of people say this, because I talk to a lot of people about this, what first got you into whiskey. Yeah. And it just sort of happened, really. My wife is from the Highlands. Obviously, I'm kind of born and raised just west of Glasgow. Been in the city for 20 odd years now, 25 years. But nobody in my family was really a whiskey drinker. My grandfather a wee bit, but not much. But then my wife was from the Highlands, and we had to go to a funeral up there one time, and at the wake they were handing out drams. And I obviously took one just to be polite, I didn't want to refuse one. And I sat down and took a sip of it, and it changed my life right there and then, basically. It was absolutely stunning. And it turned out that the man who had passed away, his favourite drink was Highland Park.
Right.
And so they were handing out drams of Highland Park at the wake. And so I took one, and as soon as I finished my glass, I went straight to the bar to order another one. It's like, what is that? Give me more of this stuff. Yeah.
We've actually mentioned that on the podcast before. I've been at a funeral in Islay.
Oh yeah.
I know you go to Islay a lot, and we do too. And it was just that whole thing of gathering around the graveside. And everybody handing out, not everybody, but all the relatives handed out whiskey, and I think oatcakes and cheese. And it was almost taking you back hundreds of years. That's that whole thing of a whiskey and a funeral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something you notice about whiskey, I think, and I've heard others say it as well. It seems to come out at certain moments, like when a baby's born, the whiskey comes out to wet the head. Or when people get married, or when people die, whiskey seems to be kind of ceremonial in some way. It comes out at like life's big moments,
Let me ask you the straight questions. How do you take your whiskey?
Usually neat. Well, actually, that's not true. More and more often now, I'm putting a wee splash of water into my whiskey. I think in my younger days, when I first got into whiskey, especially when I first discovered kind of cask strength whiskies and stuff, I really enjoyed the intensity and the full flavour of drinking them at cask strength. But maybe it's just because I'm getting on a wee bit now, I don't know, but I'm definitely like it, just a little bit toned down now. So usually I put water in my dram, but I am not precious about how you drink whiskey, Yeah. I think people should drink it however they like. I really like, whiskey cocktails, and I like whiskey with ginger ale and stuff, especially we've been having some really unusually warm weather in Glasgow just now. So having whiskey as a tall drink, with maybe soda water and lots of ice or something, is lovely, So no, I'm not precious about it. Usually I drink it neat, but I like to play around as well, have a bit of fun.
What about that topic that maybe a whiskey and a soda is, the saviour is the wrong word, but it's maybe one of the things that helps whiskey stay up there, because whiskey's become this premium product. Mm-hmm. People pay a lot of money for a very good malt. There are last week on the podcast, we just went randomly to Lidl, and we got a brilliant bottle of whiskey that Max McFarlane, the master blender, thought was excellent. But there we have these whiskies, and you've got a lot behind you. Mm-hmm. If you had to take one and drink one whiskey just now, what would it be?
Well, I brought one out earlier, which came from the Deanston distillery.
Oh yeah,
So through my business, Scottish Rogue, which I'm sure we'll get on to,
we
but we
will.
really like to promote and support local sort of distilleries, the ones that are kind of close to Glasgow. Now, Deanston's not exactly Glasgow, it's closer to Stirling, but it's only about maybe 45 minutes, 50 minutes away. And I think it's a bit of a hidden gem, really. It's getting more attention now, possibly, than it has in the past. But I still think people don't quite understand how good Deanston is. It's a real character whiskey. And this one in particular, it's only 8 years old, which for Scotch is relatively young.
Yeah.
But I don't think we look at age the same way we always did. It was finished in a Banyuls cask, and Banyuls is like well, I'm not a wine expert by any means, but I think it's like a fortified wine, a French fortified wine, and it's given this whiskey a real body and intense flavour, and I just love it. It's also bottled at 55.5%, so definitely one for that little splash of water there, I think. I'm not sure that's the kind of thing I'd use if I was making a cocktail or a highball. Maybe you might use something a bit lighter, a bit fresher. As you mentioned, the quality of stuff that Aldi and Lidl and people like that are putting out just now for a really reasonable price is exceptional, I think.
19 quid.
Yeah, I mean that's
A
brilliant.
good bottle of whiskey for 19
Yeah,
pounds.
I think that's amazing. It's so good to know that there's stuff out there, because again, it's one of my big things. I think whiskey should be for everyone, or for everyone who wants it. I don't like the idea of people ever being priced out of drinking whiskey. I think that would be a real shame. So it's good to see good, solid, quality whiskey out there that pretty much anybody can afford to enjoy.
I love telling the amazing story of Scotland's whisky industry and sharing some positivity about one of the incredible things this country has given the world. Now, if you want to share some positivity too, leave us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening to the podcast. It takes you 10 seconds and will help Cast to Glass reach a much, much wider audience. We talked to John Swinney, the FM, in the last podcast, and he was saying whiskey, it's a premium product, but we have to accept alcohol has its issues, but whiskey's not really part of that structural issue in the world, nor Scotland. But just to go back, you think that Deanston then, is that one of the big undiscovered, in your opinion, one of the undiscovered gems in whiskey when it comes to our country?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, as I say, I do think Deanston gets a lot more attention now than it used to. But I think it could grow still. It's a whiskey of real quality. Their price structure is usually fairly reasonable compared to some of the other kind of big names. And they always tend to favour bottling at slightly higher strength and things, so you feel that you get value for your money with them. And the distillery itself is beautiful. It's in an old cotton mill that was built in the 1700s, so it's got a really unique architectural look about it in comparison with other Scottish distilleries. So yeah, I think Deanston's one that we could probably celebrate a bit more. Yeah, sure.
You and I are both from Glasgow. I've got a strange accent because I was born abroad, but my mum and dad were from Glasgow, and I've said before in the podcast, my dad would sit there in the jungle of Borneo with his wee whiskey and tell me all about Glasgow. And I know you've got Scottish Rogue, and am I right in thinking that's about Glasgow? That's about celebrating the whiskey in this city.
Very much so, yeah. So we started Scottish Rogue basically just last year, so it's still quite a new enterprise. That's myself and my business partner, John Maguire. We launched officially in November last year, very much with the goal of sort of helping to really firmly establish Glasgow on the whiskey map, if you like,
You don't think it is?
Was that? I think it is to an extent. I just think Glasgow should be better thought of, really.
Okay.
What I mean by that, there's people from all over the world that come to Scotland and they're really passionate about whiskey, and they come and obviously they explore Speyside and Campbeltown and the Western Isles, and then maybe even they'll go and do the North Coast 500 or one of the kind of touristy things. And we just don't think people spend enough time in Glasgow. We think there's more to be seen here in Glasgow. We have a lot of whiskey history in this city that's been forgotten about by most people. I mean, myself included, I'm constantly researching and finding new things that I didn't know about.
Well, let's do that. Rather than go on, let's do that. The whiskey history of Glasgow. The whiskey riots. I know about the whiskey riots.
Yep, yep. So that goes all the way back to 1725, of course. In fact, it really goes back to 1707 when the Act of Union brought England and Scotland together. Because the English government at the time had a tax on malt, and when the two countries came together, they wanted to roll it out across Scotland. And the people of Scotland weren't all that keen, so it caused a bit of a riot. When it was eventually forced through in 1725, there was a huge riot, a huge protest, which became a riot in Glasgow. And that really had a huge knock-on impact because at the time, Glasgow wasn't really much of a whiskey drinking city, I don't think. It was very much a beer city at the time. But the malt tax obviously pushed the price of beer up and forced people to look elsewhere for a cheap swally, basically, you know. And what they found was lots of illicit whiskey that was being made in the Highlands and Islands and smuggled
We
down
should tell our overseas listeners and viewers that a swally is that we drink, we swallow, we swally, off and off, swally.
We'll maybe get subtitles
You
up.
must drop in a few more of these.
Yeah, maybe get subtitles up.
No, don't. So, sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so that, you know, as I say, the malt riots had a knock-on effect. People started drinking whiskey in the wake of that. And then I think by 1770, the first whiskey distillery that we know of, there might have been other ones that have been lost, but 1770, the first one we know of, opened in the city of Glasgow. And between then and, 1903, there were something like 27 different distilleries operating within the city of Glasgow. And again, the vast majority have all been forgotten about, But we try and sort of tell those stories. There's the Adelphi distillery, which was on the south bank of the River Clyde, just where the central mosque is now. That used to be the Loch Catrin Adelphi distillery. With Dundas Hill, which was up on the banks of the Forth and Clyde Canal. There was Yoker distillery. There's just so many, and that's before you even take into account all the blenders and things. We had Teacher and Sons and Mackie and Co. So the Teacher's Highland Cream was a blend that came from Glasgow. The White Horse blend came from Glasgow. There's so much history there, and as I say, even the people in Glasgow have forgotten most of it. So it's quite nice.
Do you have a wee tour? You have a tour that passes by all this stuff, do you? Because I don't know that history. I do know we've got the existing ones that you can see. So you would do what? You get people from abroad and celebrate Glasgow, or even from Scotland, celebrate Glasgow and take them round?
Yeah, among other things. So we do sort of distillery tours and things where we'll take people out to distilleries, but we try and give them a little bit of context about the history. But probably our most successful one is our whiskey bar walking tour. So we take people on a tour around the city centre of Glasgow. We tell them all about this history and show them where some of this stuff happened. And then we visit 3 different pubs along the way, and they try a different whiskey in each pub. So it's been really popular so far. As I say, we only started this year, really, so it's early days for us, but that's been really popular, and it's great fun,
Which pubs? Because I know the Piper Whiskey Bar.
We definitely use the Piper. We're good friends with Gillian in there. I know she's done this podcast, so hello to Gillian if she's
great,
yeah. Gillian's a good pal. So yeah, we use the Piper whenever we can. We like to take people to the Scotia Bar, which isn't really so much a whiskey bar, but it does have a good selection, and it is the oldest pub in Glasgow, so it's nice to take people in there,
Before you move on, I was talking to somebody who had a wedding in there a couple of weeks ago. So it's a fantastic bar. There's a big event space upstairs. I mean, I've not been. I know it's owned by Ollie Norman. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
I think Ollie has it.
Yeah.
And he's got a few other pubs as well. A well-known Glasgow character, but I think he's a very beautiful bar to be in.
Yeah.
Is that right? I've not been
really
in it for a long
is.
time.
I mean, for me, it's when you maybe in your head, I think especially for a lot of the American tourists and things, when they imagine what an old Scottish pub would look like, I think the Scotia is it. It's like very low roofs and the open beams on the roof and all that. Very dark, very atmospheric. That's the only thing when you're doing the walking tour. It's very hard to leave the pub sometimes, but you've got to move on to the next one,
And the other one is? I'm just looking up the Scotia. I
And
think
so
I
the
might have
other
got
one
that
we
wrong.
usually finish up in the Scotch Malt Whisky Society in Bath
Nice.
Street.
That's a beautiful building too.
It is gorgeous in
I
there.
was wrong about the Scotia Bar. I was thinking of Sloane's. I know the Scotia Bar. That's
Sloane's.
different. Sloane's is in the back streets
That's
behind
right.
Buchanan Street.
Yep.
Scotia Bar. Okay, right. That's a
Yeah.
whiskey bar. Yeah. Okay. And that's what you do. So people, tell me more about Glasgow and whiskey then, because you're right. I see the tourists and they come to Glasgow and they'll wander along. They'll have a look at the Clydeside distillery. They'll get off the tour bus, the big Glasgow City tour bus. But most tourists go to Edinburgh, don't they, or Speyside or the islands.
Yeah.
So tell me more about the kind of whiskey history of Glasgow.
We just think, apart from even the history, Glasgow is a really good city to explore whiskey, I think. So our opinion, it's like when we were saying earlier about, mixing whiskey and not being precious about how you drink it. I think sometimes Scotch whisky has struggled with a bit of an image problem, where a lot of snobbery and pretentiousness and stuff can kind of build up around about it. And maybe in the past that's hindered it a little bit. It stops people from exploring whiskey because they think they don't know enough, or they're not smart enough or something. It feels like you almost have to have a degree in whiskey before you start exploring it. So I think Glasgow, being such a sort of welcoming and relaxed city, there's no pretentiousness in Glasgow at all, really. People don't stand for that kind of thing in Glasgow, it doesn't go down well. So I think Glasgow's just the perfect city to bring people in and go, forget all the stuff you think you know about whiskey. We're going to tell you some stories, we're going to tell you a bit of history, and we're just going to let you discover the whiskey for yourself. We're going to give you 3 different styles, you're going to enjoy 3 different pubs, and hopefully you might find something you like along the way, I mean, obviously some of the people that come along are already kind of aficionados, they already love it, but there's always like the long-suffering partner that gets dragged along or something as well, so you're always trying to reach those people to find a way to get them to enjoy whiskey as well. And I think Glasgow's really good for that, because the pubs are so friendly and welcoming. The city in general, I mean, this summer Glasgow's just been buzzing. It's been fantastic.
Incredible.
We've been really lucky with the weather. It feels like every weekend there's something else happening,
It's been the longest summer I've remembered. I mean, I've been
Absolutely.
here since I was 10, and it's the longest.
Yeah.
It's been the longest, sunniest, warmest, loveliest time of the year for a long
really
time.
is.
Yeah. Now, if you're watching this or listening, please like and subscribe. We're delighted to have you along, and helps us get all the great guests we do. So, Neill, let's go back to your blog. You've got a blog, and I'm just wondering what you think are the big topics facing whiskey just now. We'll get on to other bits, but if you write about whiskey as a news item, and I'm a news broadcaster, as a news item, what would you say at the moment?
Troubled waters, maybe. It's a bit of an uncertain time. The whole whiskey industry feels a little bit kind of schizophrenic at the minute, I think, because it's like, one week you're getting a news report that there's a new distillery opening up, and then the next week there's a report that one's shutting down, so it all feels a little bit uncertain and a bit uneven at the minute. And obviously we don't ever want to see that. We don't ever want to see people out of a job and things like that. So that I think is probably the big thing. We've had a lot of talk about cask investments and things like that over the last few years.
A lot of good telly programs about them as well.
Exactly.
Just
So
fraud schemes, Ponzi
Yeah,
schemes,
and I'm
effectively.
hoping that with the TV coverage and things, that bubble seems to be bursting now, And again, that's really sad for the people who might end up losing money on it and things, but at least it seems that that's not growing anymore, So hopefully we're moving on from that, but it does still seems like a wee bit of a time of change. As you mentioned earlier, I work in Islay a lot. I'm over in Islay at least a couple of times a year usually. And it feels like there's a lot of change on the island just now. There's distillery managers moving on, and people, there's a lot of staff changes. So it feels like a kind of changing of the guard, like we're moving into a new era or something.
We'll get back to that episode in a second, but the best free way you can support the podcast is just hit the thumbs up button on this video and subscribe, so you get new episodes every week. It also helps lots more people find the podcast. So thank you. There's a kind of mass intake of breath, isn't there? That's the way I think of it. Everyone's going, what's going to happen? Because I think we're going to have another podcast looking at some of the numbers around, malt consumption is down, single malt consumption is down. But then you hear other people saying, well, actually, Diageo and other big companies are saying, well, look, our sales are actually going up a bit. So it's difficult to know, isn't it? We'll know when all the financial statements come out. But take me to Islay then. You go there, lovely place, beautiful distilleries, kind of almost the home of Scotch whisky in some ways. Maybe you could argue that, Speyside. What do you do in Islay and where'd you go? Because I see, is it Rachel McNeill as well as involved
That's
with you
right.
from Bowmore?
That's right. So Rachel McNeill founded and runs the Islay Whisky Academy, which is an educational experience that people can come to the island and do. They do a residential diploma, so you stay there for 6 days, and you do a course, and it's very intensive. But the great thing about it, what I love, is Rachel delves into everything, a bit of history, a bit of the island's culture, and includes that all with the whisky education as well, And that's something I love, because I've always felt, the story of whisky is the story of Scotland. The two are very interlinked. You can't take them apart. And that thing, that Scottish music, Scottish art, it's all wrapped up with whisky in one way or another, And Rachel's really good at sort of delving into that. So yeah, it's 5-6 days of intensive. We do sort of lessons in the morning from ex-industry professionals, or sometimes current industry professionals. We visit distilleries in the afternoon, and then usually we have tasting events in the evenings as well. So it's a full-on week, but great fun.
Where do you go? Do you visit, which distilleries do you go to?
We've sort of been round them all, really, I think. But we use Bowmore a lot because it's the oldest. We use Bruichladdich a lot because their sort of fascination with terroir and barley and stuff is really interesting. We go to Kilchoman because they're a farm distillery and they do the whole process from growing the barley till bottling it. That's all done on the same site. Ardbeg are always really welcoming. We go to Ardbeg a lot. And, Lafroig, Coolila, we've shared it about a bit. We've even been to the Islay Rum Distillery a few times just to see how they do that, and it's always really interesting just seeing the slight differences in the process,
If you had to say, no matter where it is in Scotland, to pick one distillery to go and see, which one would it be?
Oh, that's tough.
I know, because I'm trying to think. I'm like you. I've been to Kilchoman. I've been on Speyside. I've been to Highland Park. I've been to Dumgoyne, Glengoyne. You tell me yours, and I'll go for mine after.
Right. So I'm going to stick. This is a bit of a tried and tested answer for me, and I could pick a dozen places, but I'm going to go for Bruichladdich in Islay. I think it's probably still my favourite even now, and that all goes back. My very first ever trip to Islay in 2014, I was there with a group of friends, and we hadn't even planned to go to Bruichladdich, but we found ourselves with an afternoon free, and we rang them up to see if we could get on a tour, and they told us that they didn't have any tours on that day because the distillery was in maintenance at the time, but they told us to come round anyway. And they would, let us see one of the warehouses, and maybe they'd pour us a dram or so. So, of course, we went round, and we must have been there for about 2.5 hours, 3 hours. I think maybe they charged us £5 to see the warehouse or something, and then they let us try, lots of fantastic whisky. So all of us walked in there that day, sort of casual Bruichladdich, acquaintances, if you like, but we all left as lifelong fans, and I still find that sort of feeling when I go back there now. There's that hospitality there, I think, that other places still struggle to match for me,
And that's partly the thing of being Scottish, isn't it? My son's just moved back from France with his family. And he says, Dad, we can't believe how friendly everybody is. Everywhere you go in Glasgow, can we help you? Hello. And we I suppose we think of ourselves as being a wee bit standoffish, but actually it's a really friendly place. And you're right, you can go to a distillery just on a chance. And somebody will say, come in, mine's Kilchoman. And I don't know why, but just it's probably the one I've been to the most. Okay. I just love the look at it. I just love the fact that, as you say, it's a farm distillery. Macher Bay's down there, you can go down the beach. It's maybe not the fanciest distillery in the world, but it's beautiful. Yeah. So you take people around Islay, they have a look around the island.
Yeah.
And you think there's a changing of the guard on Islay?
It seems to be, yeah. As I say, just that's just an observation. I'm not from Islay, so I don't have a window into the inner workings or anything like that. I'm not prey to the Islay rumour mill or anything. But I do. It seems every time I go over, somebody's moved from one distillery to another, or there's been a slight change. It just seems to be happening a lot. Maybe it's just that there's people who have been doing it for a while, or maybe coming to retirement age or whatever, and looking to slow down a little bit, something like that. I guess that's inevitable. That people will move on eventually. So yeah, it does seem to be sort of shifting and evolving a little from my experience, anyway.
To go back to Glasgow, if you were to speak to people watching or listening and say, look, you must see, you've already talked about 3 whiskey bars. Give me 2 or 3 other places you must go to in Glasgow to just understand Glasgow whiskey and the tie-up.
Okay, so I think definitely the Clydeside, obviously, as you mentioned earlier. So you've got to see the Clydeside, and I think as well you should go to see Glasgow Distillery if you can, which is down in Hillington. Only recently they started doing tours. They've made their tour available to the public, and it's very limited supply and it's filling up very fast. So you need to be lucky to get in. But it is a brilliant distillery and very different from the Clydeside. So if you can get to see Glasgow, that's an absolute must. Obviously the whiskey bars as well. There's lots of great restaurants. I suppose maybe even getting to see somewhere like Glengoyne, which I know you mentioned earlier as well.
Lovely.
Glengoyne is only maybe half an hour outside of Glasgow. It takes you about maybe 40 minutes or so to drive there, something like that. And it is beautiful and everything you imagine a Scottish distillery is going to be. It's like postcard perfect. But I suppose I always think one of the reasons that distillery must have been so successful because it was built in 1830 or whenever it was. So it's been there 200 years. And when you think about it, it was in the middle of nowhere, so they were able to make their whiskey without the prying eyes of the excise men and stuff. But then they were also really easily accessible for Glasgow, so you've got a very easy route to market there as well, So I think they're probably a good example of the people that were making whiskey and smuggling it into Glasgow back in the day, the ones that really got that foothold there in the city to begin with is probably people like Glengoyne,
But just to describe the kind of Clydeside distillery, it's beautiful, isn't it? Brand new, right on the River Clyde. Big glass-fronted building. You can see the huge brass copper stills. And then Dumgoyne's different. Dumgoyne's this older country distillery with a lovely hill behind it, and then the kind of gateway to Stirlingshire and the Highlands. It's just they're both beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah. As I say, if you take those 3 distilleries, I think you got a nice cross section because Glasgow Distillery is very industrial in appearance. It's literally just a little warehouse in the Hillington Industrial Estate, and somebody's put a distillery inside it, but it makes phenomenal whiskey. Their Glasgow 1770 whiskey is outstanding. So it's very kind of grimy and industrial and not at all kind of tourist friendly, if you like. Then you've got the Clydeside, which also makes wonderful whiskey, but it's a very modern distillery with the tourist in mind. That visitor centre plan was part of things right from the very beginning. And then you can move out to Glengoyne, which is like stepping back in time, really, They're still making whiskey there the same way they were 200 years ago, So you get a nice sort of, here's 3 very different ways of doing the same thing, really,
I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much. What's your plan now? The next, couple of months? What are you doing? You're getting and where's your market? Who's coming here to do these tours?
So a lot of Americans, North Americans, US, Canada, but we get people from all over, really. We've had Australia, New Zealand. I had a lovely couple from Hungary the other day. So we're getting Europe as well. No, it's been a real cross. We do get some locals coming along as well. That's always fun because, like you say, there's so much that they didn't realise about their city as well. So yeah, more of that coming up. We also have a really good whiskey tasting coming up at the end of this month on the 29th. And it's really good fun. We call it Dram Jam. So it's a whiskey tasting with some live music as well. We use live traditional Scottish musicians, so usually like a fiddler and guitarist, or the last time we had a girl that was playing the harp. And it was just beautiful, you know. So while people are sitting and enjoying these wonderful whiskies, there's some beautiful music playing in the background, and it's just a very chilled, relaxed, sort of informal way to introduce people to really nice whiskey, you know. So we've got that coming up in the 29th in the Old Toll Bar in Glasgow, which is a great wee pub as well. So that's our big one, really. That's coming up next. Lots more walking tours, distillery tours. Yeah, busy times, but all good for it, you know.
You've talked lovingly of Glasgow, and I kind of buy into that, being a Glaswegian. And you've talked about how it's maybe the unsung hero of Scotch to some extent, and you've talked about 3 whiskey bars. But give me a glimpse into what whiskey means to you, because to me it does mean time with my dad. I mean, I'm not a buff. I'm not a whiskey buff like you are, and I do think whiskey ends up being in this place where it's the danger of thinking your house is an investment, isn't it? If you think your house is an investment, when actually your house is your place to live. So you pay accordingly. And we get this thing with whiskey where it's becoming very stratospheric. You know, somebody will pay a lot of money for something special. What does whiskey mean to you?
I mean, I for me it is... For one thing, I think whiskey's a great unifier. You know, that's something I'm always amazed at when we do these tastings and our tours, and especially when I'm over in Islay with the Islay Whisky Academy. We get people from all over the world, and all those people come from different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, maybe different class systems, whatever it might be, different cultures. But when you put everybody round the table and put a glass in their hand, suddenly we all become the same again, you know, and I think that's a very powerful thing, especially in a world that can be quite divided at times just now, you know. Anything that we can help humanise one another and bring ourselves together is very welcome. But I think, you know, a great example that I'll maybe just end on, my wife and I were in Islay a couple of years ago for the Féisgíle, the Islay Festival, and we stopped into Bowmore Distillery, and I picked up a bottle of that year's Islay Whisky Festival bottle. And we went out and sat on the beach afterwards, and it was a beautiful sunny day. So we decided to take our shoes and socks off, and we walked into Loch and Dol, and we were standing with the sun on our face and our feet in the loch, and we thought the only thing missing is a nice drink here. We just need a nice drink. And then we remembered that we had bought the bottle of Bowmore, you know. So we went back, and fortunately we had also bought a mug from the distillery shop and a little water jug from the distillery shop as well. So we poured a dram each. I drank out the water jug, my wife drank out the mug, and we stood there with our feet in Loch and Dol, the sun on our faces, the distillery right behind us, and we had a little dram there, just the two of us. We didn't even speak, we didn't need to, you know. But those moments, I think, are what whiskey's all about. That's what you're always chasing. That sort of perfect moment, I think. And I could have kept that bottle and put it on auction and probably made double my money or something on it, but that would never have been anywhere near close to what that moment was worth, standing there with my feet in the loch, you know. That to me is what whiskey's all about.
What a way to end. Neill Murphy, Scot on Scotch. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, John.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives? We're never going home. Never going home. All it took was one sip of the water